In the world of true crime, some cases are stranger than others. But some, well, they defy all logic and reason. Today, we'll be looking at 5 chilling and most twisted true crime stories.
Christmas Eve is usually a time for love, laughter, and joy. But in Carnation, Washington, that night turned into something no one could have imagined. 6 people from one family were murdered inside their home. It was planned by their own daughter and her boyfriend. What has actually happened, and why their own daughter killed them all, even children? On the morning of December 26, 2007, Linda Teal was worried. Her best friend Judy Anderson hadn't shown up for work at the local post office. Judy was reliable, punctual, and never skipped work without calling. Linda drove out to the Anderson family's home, a quiet property tucked into the woods outside of town. The road was still, the air cold. She parked, walked up to the door, and noticed the silence. That's when she stepped inside and saw them. Bodies. 6 people. Her best friend Judy, Judy's husband Wayne, their son Scott, his wife Erica, and their 2 young children, Olivia and Nathan, had all been shot dead. Carnation, a town of about 2,000 people, had never seen anything like this. A massacre of an entire family. On Christmas. The shock was overwhelming. Linda had to step back outside to catch her breath. She could barely make sense of what she'd seen. At first, Linda called 911.
911?
There's been a murder. There's 3 people dead that I can see right now.
Inside?
I just came up. She works with me.
Inside a house?
Yes.
What do you see?
There's a baby and a man and a woman, and she's my best friend.
She thought maybe they had all died from carbon monoxide poisoning. That would at least make sense. But inside the home, blood had soaked into the carpet. The air smelled metallic. This wasn't an accident. It was murder. Brutal and intentional. The Anderson family. Wayne Anderson was 60 years old, a hard-working Boeing engineer, the kind of man who kept to his schedule and always helped his kids when he could. His wife Judy, 61, was beloved in town. Everyone knew her from the post office. They had 2 children, Scott and Michelle. Scott was the one people said had it all, a good job, a wife named Erica, 2 sweet kids, 5-year-old Olivia and 3-year-old Nathan. Their family was the image of stability. Michelle's life, however, looked different. She lived in a rundown trailer just a short walk from her parents' home. She worked a low-paying job at Target and had been in a long relationship with Joseph McEnroe, a man most considered lazy, aimless, and bad news. Despite their differences, the Andersons seemed like a close family, but under the surface, there was tension. Michelle felt excluded. She believed her parents favored Scott, and that bitterness had been growing for years. Friends of the family had noticed small cracks in their relationships. Michelle would often complain that no one listened to her, that her brother always got more support and praise.
Michelle and Joseph met in 2001 through a dating site. Their relationship became intense and dependent. Joseph had his own issues. He suffered from anxiety, had no job, and often seemed emotionally lost. Those close to him described him as a follower, not someone who made bold decisions. Joseph spent most of his time at home. He didn't have many friends in Carnation. People described him as quiet, polite, even awkward. But he was also vulnerable, easily swayed, especially by someone as emotionally charged as Michelle. Michelle told Joseph about her frustrations, that her family didn't respect her, that they didn't help her, that they treated her like a failure. She also claimed Scott had borrowed $40,000 from her and never paid her back. In her mind, she had been used, ignored, and left behind. And Joseph, who was already detached from reality, started to believe it too. By mid-2006, Joseph had quietly purchased 2 firearms, a Smith & Wesson Model 19 Magnum revolver and a 9mm semi-automatic pistol. The pair didn't talk to anyone about what they were thinking, but the seeds were there. A plan was forming. Michelle often spoke bitterly about her parents, that they didn't treat her fairly, that they loved her brother more, that she didn't matter. Then in 2007, the final straw came. After years of letting her live rent-free, her parents asked Michelle to start paying rent for the trailer on their land. To her, it was betrayal. After everything, they wanted money. They talked about cutting ties, about leaving. But first, Michelle said they had to take care of unfinished business. While families across America gathered for Christmas dinners and exchanged gifts, Michelle and Joseph got into their car and headed for her parents' home. Judy was in the back room wrapping presents for her grandchildren. Wayne was elsewhere in the house. Joseph walked in first, hiding his weapon. He distracted Judy with small talk. Michelle approached Wayne with her gun. She aimed and pulled the trigger, but it jammed. In a panic, Joseph stepped in. He raised his gun and shot Wayne. Judy heard the gunfire and rushed in. She screamed when she saw Wayne's body, but Joseph turned the gun on her. He later said he looked her in the eye, apologized, and then pulled the trigger. The parents were dead. Michelle and Joseph dragged their bodies to a nearby shed and tried to clean the blood with towels and chemicals, but they didn't have much time. Scott and his family were on their way. About 45 minutes later, Scott arrived with Erica and their 2 young children. Michelle greeted them at the door. She pulled her gun and fired. Scott tried to protect his family, but was shot 4 times. One of the bullets hit his neck. He died within seconds. Erica was hit twice, but stayed conscious. She spotted a cordless phone, crawled behind the couch, and dialed 911. The call went through, but Joseph saw her and ripped the phone away, smashing it to pieces. She begged for her children's lives. He shot her in the head. Now only Olivia and Nathan remained. Michelle couldn't do it. She turned to Joseph. He whispered an apology, raised his gun, and shot Olivia. She didn't have time to react. Nathan was on the floor, quietly playing with the phone's broken batteries. Joseph later said the boy looked up at him, as if he knew what was coming. Then he shot him too. 6 lives gone. 3 generations erased. Michelle locked the gate to delay police. When deputies responded to Erica's 911 call, they couldn't get in. The house was quiet. A neighbor said they hadn't seen anything unusual, so the police left. Michelle and Joseph had bought themselves a little more time. They packed and fled. First, they headed toward Canada, then changed course to Årjäng. But 2 days after the murders, they made the mistake of driving back near the crime scene, maybe out of guilt, maybe curiosity. Police spotted them. Something felt off. They were detained. At first, they lied. They said they were going to Vegas to get married, but Michelle cracked. She broke down crying. She confessed everything. Joseph followed. Both were arrested and charged with 6 counts of first-degree murder. What followed was years of legal back and forth, psychological evaluations, hearings, motions, delays. Michelle claimed she planned the murders. Joseph claimed he was manipulated into it. Prosecutors wanted the death penalty. The public wanted it too. But in 2013, the judge ruled it out. The defense argued that both defendants had severe mental health issues, though the court ultimately held them responsible. Michelle and Joseph were sentenced to life in prison with no chance of parole. There is no surviving Andersons, no one left to tell their story, except those of us who still remember. Do you believe Michelle and Joseph should have received the death penalty, or was life in prison enough? Let us know what you think in the comments. A man and woman with 8 beautiful kids. On the outside, their life looked perfect, a big, happy family in a quiet Utah neighborhood. One morning, everything changed. Michelle MacNeill was found unresponsive in the bathtub. No bruises, no wounds, nothing to explain what happened. The police didn't suspect a thing. Doctors said it was natural causes. Everyone moved on. Everyone except her daughter. Because days before she died, Michelle had quietly told her, "If anything happens to me, don't trust your dad." That sentence changed everything. Her daughter couldn't let it go, so she started watching her father closely. She uncovered something terrifying. Why would a man murder his wife, the mother of his children? And how did one daughter, against all odds, prove the truth when no one else could see it? Michelle Summers was born on January 15th, 1957 in Concord, California. She was raised in a warm, loving Mormon home in Concord, California. She was graceful, kind, and full of heart. In 1976, she was crowned Miss Concord, not just for her beauty, but for her poise, charm, and kindness. Then came Martin McNeel. He was confident and charismatic, with just enough mystery to draw Michelle in. They met at a church event, and within a month, they were married. It looked like a love story. Together, they built a big family, 4 biological kids, and later, 4 adopted daughters. Their home looked like the picture of happiness. Michelle was the emotional anchor, Martin, the successful doctor. But behind the scenes, things were unraveling. Martin could be controlling. He cared deeply about his image, always polished, always impressive. But in private, his temper flared. He had affairs. One in the 90s ended in scandal. Michelle was heartbroken. Martin responded by threatening suicide. It became a cycle. Over the years, Martin changed, not just emotionally, but physically. He became obsessed with his looks, lost weight, tanned constantly, and spent more and more time away from home, Michelle noticed. So did her daughter, Alexis. They looked into his phone records and saw the same number again and again, late at night, odd hours. The name? Gypsy Willis. When Michelle confronted him, he brushed it off. Then came the suggestion, plastic surgery. He said it might boost her confidence, maybe even help their marriage. On April 3rd, 2007, Michelle went in for surgery. Martin made sure her prescriptions were filled, a risky mix of strong medications. Alexis, a med student at the time, was immediately concerned. Michelle's response chilled her. "If anything happens to me, make sure it wasn't your father." A week later, on April 11th, Alexis called her mom. Michelle sounded good, better even. It was the last time they ever spoke. Later that morning, Martin picked up little Ada from preschool. They returned home to silence, too quiet. Martin told Ada to go upstairs. Moments later, her scream echoed through the house. Michelle was in the bathtub, still, submerged. Martin, recovering from an injury, hobbled up the stairs, drained the tub, and told Ada to find a neighbor. Then he called 911. But the call wasn't panicked. It was strange, cold, rushed. He gave few details, hung up abruptly, and forced the dispatcher to call him back. Twice. By the time help arrived, Michelle was gone. At the hospital, Martin wasn't crying. He was yelling, blaming, pointing fingers, even at Michelle, unconscious on the stretcher. Then he called Alexis. His voice was flat. "Your mother's been found unconscious in the tub." No emotion, no hesitation, just cold. At the hospital, Michelle was pronounced dead. Cause, natural. heart issues, high blood pressure. No signs of foul play. Case closed. But for Michelle's children, especially Alexis, that explanation didn't sit right. She remembered the drugs, the warning, and the way Martin had acted. She called her sister Rachel from the airport and begged her to go to the house and find the medications. But when Rachel searched, the pills were gone. Martin claimed he didn't know what happened. Maybe the police took them. Maybe they were misplaced. Then their brother Damien confessed. Martin had told him to flush all the pills down the toilet. Why? Martin said the sight of them made him feel worse. To Alexis, that was no coincidence. And then Martin made another move that raised even more suspicion. He planned Michelle's funeral just 3 days after her death. Fast. Too fast. And he barred Michelle's family from attending. Told them outright, if they showed up, he'd call the police. For someone mourning his wife, Martin didn't seem broken. He seemed in control, calculated. And someone unexpected showed up at the funeral, a young brunette woman. No one knew her. No one asked. But soon, her identity would become very clear. Days after the funeral, Martin said he needed help around the house. With 4 young girls still at home, he claimed he couldn't manage alone. Alexis offered to come home. She was willing to take time off from med school. Martin refused. He said he already had someone. Her name, Gypsy. Alexis and Rachel froze. Gypsy Willis. Martin admitted it was her, but insisted there was no affair. Within 2 weeks of Michelle's funeral, Gypsy moved in. She didn't cook, didn't clean, didn't help with the kids, but she doted on Martin like she was already his wife. Just 3 months after Michelle died, Martin took Gypsy to meet her parents, declared she was the love of his life, proposed. Alexis confronted him. In response, he banned her from the house, told the other kids not to speak to her again. But Alexis didn't back down. She and Rachel started a blog. They shared their mother's story. Soon, messages started pouring in. Women who claimed to have had affairs with Martin while he was married. They took everything to the police. Not enough for a murder charge, yet. But it got attention. Investigators began digging, and what they found was unbelievable. Martin McNeel, the successful doctor, had never graduated high school. He used a fake diploma to get into college and later medical school. Early in his marriage, he was arrested for fraud, opening bank accounts in dead people's names, writing $36,000 in bad checks. He spent just 180 days in jail. Still became a doctor. He claimed to be a military vet, discharged after saying he heard voices telling him to kill. Still, he collected a $3,000 monthly veteran's pension for 30 years. In 2009, Martin and Gypsy were arrested, not for murder, but identity theft. They sent their adopted daughter, Giselle, back to Ukraine, and used her identity to create a fake person, Jillian McNeel. With that fake name, Gypsy applied for credit cards, loans, all to escape her debts. That opened the door. Detectives re-examined Michelle's death. Toxicology showed multiple powerful drugs in her system. Drugs Alexis knew she didn't need. Drugs only Martin had access to. Alexis believed he crushed them and put them in her food. Martin's story about finding Michelle didn't match the physical evidence. Ada, the youngest daughter, said Michelle was fully submerged, but Martin said she was slumped over the tub, legs out. That detail didn't add up. He claimed he tried CPR, but paramedics said a massive amount of water poured out of Michelle's lungs, proof no CPR had been done. Even a neighbor confirmed Michelle was found submerged, face up. Then came the turning point. In 2012, just months after Martin was released from prison for fraud, he was arrested again, this time for murder. His trial began in 2013. Witnesses painted a horrifying picture. A former lover testified that Martin once claimed to have killed his own brother by pushing his head underwater after a suicide attempt. He even offered to kill her husband. One of his daughters said he'd talked about a suicide pact with her, and Gypsy's former roommate dropped the bombshell. Martin and Gypsy had plotted Michelle's death before it happened, joking about poison, talking about cutting Michelle's brakes. After 11 hours of deliberation, the jury found Martin McNeel guilty of first-degree murder. He was sentenced to life in prison, but prison wouldn't hold him forever. On April 6, 2017, Martin was found dead near the prison greenhouse. He had used chemicals to take his own life. There were no cameras nearby. He left no note, no confession. And one final twist after Michelle's death, Martin rewrote his will. Each of his children would receive just $1. Everything else went to Gypsy. Even in death, Martin tried to erase his children, but Alexis and her siblings refused to let the truth die with him. They kept fighting. And thanks to them, the world knows who Martin McNeel really was, and what he did to the woman who trusted him most. Valentina Trespalacios had it all, a thriving DJ career, and a future full of promise. But just days after moving in with her new boyfriend, an American man she thought she could trust, her dreams came to a sudden, horrifying end. Police found her body in horrible condition, stuffed inside a blue suitcase, dumped like trash in a Bogota dumpster. Her head wedged under the lid, wrapped in tape, strangled, beaten, burned. And the man responsible? Not a stranger, not a jealous fan, the man she trusted most. This is the disturbing true story of how love turned into obsession, how a controlling man from the US became her worst nightmare, and how police across borders raced to bring him to justice. Valentina Trespalacios was only 23 years old, born in Bogota in 2001. She was bright, outgoing, and had a passion for electronic music. When most people her age were still figuring things out, she was already performing at clubs and music festivals across Latin America. Valentina wasn't just a DJ. She was a rising star in Colombia's EDM scene. She toured in cities across Colombia, Chile, Brazil, Mexico, and Peru. Friends described her as full of energy, the kind of person who made every room brighter. On social media, she shared her love for music, her travels, and her growing relationship with a man named John Poulos. John Nelson Poulos was from Wisconsin, USA. He was older, in his mid-30s, and had met Valentina online in late 2021. At first, it was just chatting, but soon he was sending her gifts, money, and promises of a future together. John seemed charming, but behind the smooth talk was a man with red flags. He pressured Valentina into cosmetic surgeries, lip fillers, cheek enhancements, and even encouraged breast implants. He wanted her to look like his perfect woman, and he made sure she knew he was paying for it. Then came the control, the obsession. John was deeply jealous. He hired a private investigator to track Valentina's friends and movements. He questioned every man she talked to. He wanted total control. But Valentina's free spirit clashed with his controlling nature. Still, in January 2023, John flew to Colombia with serious intentions. He rented an apartment in Bogota and talked about marriage. Valentina had doubts, but love, or what looked like love, kept her going. It would be the last mistake she ever made. John arrived in Bogota on Thursday, January 19th, 2023. Security cameras caught him entering his Airbnb late that night, dragging behind him a blue suitcase, the very one that would later hold Valentina's body. The next day, January 20th, the couple argued. John arrived earlier than planned and got upset when Valentina said she couldn't meet. She had a party to attend. He was instantly jealous. but they made up. That evening, he helped her pack her things and move into the new apartment. She sent videos to her mom and friends, smiling and showing off their new place. Everything seemed fine. Around 3 a.m. early Saturday morning, the couple took a taxi to a nightclub in South Bogota. Valentina had a small DJ set there. Cameras captured her doing what she loved most, spinning tracks, dancing, smiling. John stood nearby, watching, always watching. After the show, they chatted with club staff and then left together. It was the last time anyone outside the apartment would see her alive. Later that day, Valentina messaged friends saying she was staying in for the night. She planned to relax with her boyfriend, maybe order food, maybe cook. Nothing seemed off, until it was too late. On the night of January 21st, Valentina made a video call to her younger brother. She was lying in bed next to John. They looked happy, nothing alarming. That was around 9 p.m. That would be the last time Valentina was seen alive. In the early hours of January 22nd, inside that new apartment in Bogota, something terrible happened. While the city slept, Valentina lay next to the man she thought she loved. She was still in her pajamas, likely already drifting off. But John Poulos had made up his mind. In a cold, calculated act, he wrapped a rope tightly around her neck and strangled her to death. The forensic report called it mechanical asphyxia. But let's be clear, he choked the life out of her. She never screamed, never fought. There were no defensive wounds. Everything suggests she was asleep or only just waking up when he attacked. But he didn't stop there. The autopsy revealed blunt force trauma to her head, bruises across her body, and most chilling of all, a burn mark on her lower back, possibly from a heated object. It's unclear if she was tortured before or after death. We may never know the full horror of what happened in that bedroom, but the truth is, Valentina died in pain at the hands of a man who wanted to own her, a man who couldn't handle rejection, a man whose love turned into a death sentence. By the next morning, Sunday, John was caught on camera again, this time carrying 2 large garbage bags and heading to the parking garage. Then he returned to the apartment. At 10 a.m., he came out again, this time wheeling a large blue suitcase, the same one he brought when he arrived, now wrapped in a gray blanket. Inside that suitcase was Valentina's body. John acted calm, methodical. He checked his surroundings, loaded the suitcase into a silver sedan, and drove off. At around 3 p.m. on Sunday, January 22nd, a sanitation worker near Bogota Park made a horrifying discovery. He noticed a blue suitcase wrapped in black tape. The lid was slightly open, and from it a human head was poking out. Police arrived immediately. Inside the suitcase was Valentina's lifeless body, bruised, strangled, and dumped like trash. Her student ID and personal papers were found nearby in a black box, another strange move by the killer. Most murderers try to hide evidence, but not this one. John Poulos was now missing. All calls went to voicemail. The moment news of the murder hit the press, he deleted all his social media accounts. By Monday, January 23rd, Colombian authorities had one name on their suspect list, John Poulos. CCTV footage told the story. 300 hours of surveillance showed him entering the apartment with Valentina and leaving without her, only the suitcase. Digital clues helped too. Valentina had left her WhatsApp logged in on a friend's laptop. That friend found messages and a photo John had sent, posing with the same suitcase before flying to Colombia. Interpol issued a red notice. A manhunt began. On January 24th, police in Panama caught a break. John was found at Tocumen International Airport, trying to flee to Turkey. Authorities arrested him just in time. After his arrest, more disturbing details came out. Back in the U.S., John had a history. He was previously married with 3 kids and had a restraining order against him from his ex-wife for domestic violence. He was also known for obsessing over adult websites, sometimes spending 6 hours a day browsing, and had been messaging multiple women online under fake names, sometimes calling himself Magic Lord. His messages to one woman turned dark. After she rejected him, he replied, "That's enough reason for murder out of jealousy." John treated women like property. With Valentina, he thought money bought loyalty, and when she showed independence, it enraged him. That's why he killed her. Forensic experts concluded Valentina was strangled in her sleep, likely using a rope. She had bruises on her head, hemorrhages on her tongue, and burns on her body. She never stood a chance. John Poulos was extradited to Colombia, where he was officially charged with premeditated murder and evidence tampering. He denied everything, claimed he was mistreated during his arrest, and asked for legal protection. But the evidence was overwhelming: surveillance footage, messages, his escape attempt, his past behavior. Currently, John Poulos remains in solitary confinement in a Bogotá prison as prosecutors push for the maximum sentence, 50 years behind bars. A team of over 14 experts is working to ensure he never harms another woman again. Valentina Trespalacios trusted the wrong man. She believed she'd found love, but instead she walked into the arms of a predator. Her story is a chilling reminder. Behind the perfect social media smiles, behind the expensive gifts and big promises, danger can hide. Sometimes the person who says they love you most can be the one who ends your life. Let Valentina's story be a wake-up call. Stay smart, stay safe, and always trust your instincts. Emma Young was just a teenager when she fell in love, got married, and had 2 children. The couple wasn't ready for the weight of children, and marriage down. Emma left and took the kids. Her ex-husband never forgave her. She tried to move on, built a new life with a man who adored her, and raised her children like his own. It should have been a new beginning, but then, one quiet evening, Emma and her 2 children were found in a bloodbath inside their home. It looked like a personal attack, fueled by rage. Police immediately turned to the most obvious suspect, the angry ex-husband, but he wasn't the killer. When the truth came out, it chilled investigators to the bone. The real murderer? Someone no one expected. Someone whose motive ran deeper and darker than anyone could imagine. The police figured it out. They knew exactly who did it. But the evidence wasn't enough. So how do you stop a murderer when the law can't touch them? This is one of the most shocking true crime cases to ever come out of Sweden. A twisted tale of obsession, heartbreak, and a justice system pushed to its limits. Before we dive in, if you're still watching this video, just take a second to like the video and hit the subscribe button. It doesn't cost you anything, but it helps us a lot. Emma Young Stig was just a girl from Stockholm. Born in 1985, she was the youngest of 2 sisters in a modest, loving family. She wasn't after fame, fortune, or anything extraordinary, just a quiet life, a little happiness, and one day, a family of her own. At 19, Emma thought she found that happiness when she fell in love with a boy named Nicholas. They met in high school, young and hopeful, and Emma, barely out of her teens, got married. By the time they walked down the aisle, she was already pregnant. First came Max, their son. Then, a year and a half later, their daughter Saga. Emma and Nicholas were far too young for the responsibilities they were carrying. The constant noise, diapers, money troubles, sleepless nights, they weren't ready. The arguing started over chores, over money, over nothing and over everything. It didn't take long before love turned into resentment and eventually separation. But divorce didn't end things, it only made them more complicated. The children stayed with Emma. She loved them deeply and wanted to give them a fresh start. So when she met someone new, a man named Torny Hellberg, she moved to a quiet town called Årjäng, about 150 kilometers from Stockholm. And she took Max and Saga with her. Nicholas was furious. He felt she had taken his kids away. What followed was a bitter, drawn-out custody battle. They went to court. There were threats. Emma even reported him to the police, but she didn't stop fighting for her chance at a better life. Torny was different, stable, kind. He accepted Max and Saga like they were his own. Emma stayed home to care for them while Torny worked. They planned to marry in the summer of 2008. Emma was finally building the future she'd once only dreamed of. But love can't protect you from what you don't see coming. It was just a normal Monday. Torny left for work early. Emma stayed home with the kids. That evening, she cooked dinner while chatting with her sister, Katarina, online. They were discussing gifts for their parents' upcoming anniversary. Around 6:30 p.m., Torny called to say he'd be home late. Emma said that was fine. She'd start dinner with the kids. At exactly 7:07 p.m., in the middle of typing a message to her sister, Emma suddenly went silent. She never hit send. Katarina waited, confused, watching the blinking typing dots. But the message never came. She called Emma's phone, no answer. Then she called Torny. He was on his way home and just pulling into the driveway. The front door was unlocked. That was strange. Inside, the house was a mess. Toys, furniture, clutter everywhere. At first, Torny thought the kids had made a mess while playing, until he saw the blood. His eyes scanned the room in panic. Then he saw her, little Saga, lying in a pool of blood on the floor. Her tiny body twisted, her face unrecognizable. Nearby was Max in the same horrifying state. Then Emma, her face bashed in, barely breathing, sprawled unnaturally in the hallway. It was too much to process. With shaking hands, Torny called emergency services. I think they're all dead. But they weren't. Not yet. Emma groaned. Somehow, she was still alive. Paramedics rushed all 3 victims to the nearest hospital. The scene they left behind was pure chaos. Blood on the walls, floors, furniture. The rescue efforts had disturbed much of the evidence. Doctors immediately put Emma into a medically induced coma. Her injuries were catastrophic. Open skull fractures, severe brain trauma, massive blood loss. Max and Saga were barely clinging to life. Even if they survived, they would likely never walk or breathe on their own again. Police launched a full investigation. But they were already racing against time, because if Emma survived, she was the only person who could identify the attacker. And whoever did this might come back to finish the job. The first suspect was obvious, Torny. He wasn't the children's father. He wasn't married to Emma. Maybe there had been a fight, but Torny had a rock-solid alibi. He was caught on CCTV, seen leaving work, driving home, right up until the moment he walked into that bloody house. Colleagues confirmed his schedule. He was ruled out. Next, police turned to Nicholas, the ex-husband. He had motive. He had anger. He had once threatened Emma. But when they told him that Max and Saga were dead, he broke down, crying, devastated, begging for answers. He claimed he was away on business that day, 120 miles from Årjäng. The alibi checked out. He didn't do it either. Then a neighbor came forward. She remembered seeing someone strange, short, thin, wearing a black hoodie, lurking around Emma's house around 5 p.m. that day. The person didn't speak, didn't knock, just watched. Security footage from a nearby store caught a glimpse of the figure, hooded, avoiding cameras. When police showed the footage to Torny, his face drained of color. That could be Christina. Christina Schurer, Torney's ex. She was 31, from Germany, intelligent, educated, well-traveled. But behind the polished image, something was off. Torney had met her in 2006 while vacationing in Greece. They had a brief fling. When he went back to Sweden, she followed, uninvited. She became obsessive. When he tried to end things, she flooded him with calls and messages. When that didn't work, she showed up at his door. One night, after being rejected again, she swallowed pills and claimed she couldn't live without him. She was hospitalized. Torney called her family, urged them to get her psychiatric help. She was admitted to a hospital. But the obsession didn't end. In 2007, Christina returned to Sweden. She claimed she'd given birth to Torney's son, but had given the child up for adoption. Torney was confused. The timelines didn't add up. He asked questions. Her answers changed every time. Then came the most chilling moment. In January 2008, Christina said the child was sick, that he needed to come to Germany, urgently. A man claiming to be the adoptive father called Torney. But when Torney, suspicious, started asking detailed questions, the man hung up. Emma, by his side, was convinced there was no child. It was all a manipulation. They were right. After identifying the hooded figure in the footage as Christina, police moved quickly. But she was gone, back to Germany. An international arrest warrant was issued, and Christina was picked up within days. She denied everything. But when she was extradited to Sweden, she repeatedly asked to see Torney. She was calm, smiling, waving in court like she was happy to be there. Then the evidence started pouring in. In her apartment, investigators found dozens of photos of Emma and her children stolen from social media, threatening captions written under their faces, Google searches, how to kill without leaving evidence, how to hide a weapon, how to cover up blood. A detailed layout of Emma's home notes about Torney's work schedule and Emma's daily routine. Among the chaotic crime scene, forensics isolated a bloody sneaker print. The tread matched a specific athletic shoe. That shoe model? Christina's roommate confirmed she owned it. One more detail, a hammer had gone missing from the roommate's toolkit. The murder weapon was never found. By the end of March, Emma slowly emerged from her coma. At first, she couldn't remember anything. She thought she'd been in a car crash. She kept asking, "Where are Max and Saga?" Doctors didn't know how to answer. Eventually, they told her, she broke. Each time they told her, she forgot again. Her brain simply refused to accept it, until they brought her back to the house. That's when the memories returned. The doorbell. The figure in black. A flash of pain. The desperate attempt to reach her children. The fall in the hallway. And one last thing, the attacker's face. It was Christina. The trial began in July 2008. Christina's behavior was chilling. She smiled in court, laughed during testimony, waved to the crowd. Even when shown photos of the children's mangled bodies, she didn't flinch. Psychiatrists declared her sane. This wasn't insanity. It was cruelty. Emma testified, and when she saw Christina in person, she fainted. When revived, she whispered, "That's the face. That's the last thing I saw." The jury didn't take long. Christina Schurer was found guilty of 2 counts of murder, with extreme cruelty, and 1 count of attempted murder. She was sentenced to life in prison, with no possibility of parole. She was also ordered to pay 20,000 euros to Emma. There was never any child, just a jealous, obsessive ex who couldn't accept that the man she wanted had moved on. Emma's road to recovery was long and agonizing, but she wasn't alone. Torney stayed. He didn't walk away. In the summer of 2010, they married. They went on to have 2 more children, who know the story of their older brother and sister. Max and Saga's photos still hang in their home. They're not forgotten. They never will be.
January 27th, 2025, Lakefield, Missouri. A man named Mike Henderson was out for his usual jog through Lakefield Park when he saw something near the lake's edge. A dead body of a young woman named Rachel Carter. And what happened to her over the next few hours would uncover something far darker than anyone expected. Because Rachel wasn't just killed, she was hunted, and she wasn't the only one. It was a quiet Saturday morning in the peaceful town of Lakefield. At around 6:15 a.m., Mike Henderson, a local gym teacher, was jogging his regular route through Lakefield Park. The sky was still gray, and a thin layer of frost clung to the grass. Everything felt still. Too still. As Mike passed near the edge of the lake, he saw something just off the path, something blue and bunched up near the trees. At first, he thought it was trash, but then he saw the hand, pale, lifeless, sticking out from a blue tarp. He froze. His first instinct was denial. Maybe it was a mannequin. Maybe this was some twisted prank. But deep down, he knew it wasn't. He called 911 with a shaky voice. "There's a body in the park. Please hurry." Police arrived within minutes and taped off the area. The tarp was opened carefully. What they found made seasoned officers turn away. It was a young woman, mid to late 20s. Her clothes were torn. There were bruises on her arms. And the worst part, her face had been badly damaged, likely post-mortem. No ID, no phone, just a torn red hoodie and white sneakers. Detective Julia Price was assigned to the case. She was methodical, sharp-eyed, but quiet. Someone who preferred observing over talking. Right away, she noticed something off. There wasn't a drop of blood nearby. No drag marks. No signs of a struggle. The body had been dumped. And the woman? She was a Jane Doe. No missing person report matched her. But then Julia found something. A small, smudged ink stamp on the woman's wrist. One of those invisible stamps clubs use. That gave her a window. If the body was dumped overnight, maybe the woman had been out Thursday or Friday. So Julia and her team spent hours reviewing grainy footage from local bars. At first, nothing. But then, there she was. Red hoodie, long dark hair, leaving a bar called the Hollow Room at 11:30 p.m. on Thursday night. She wasn't alone. A man followed her out, mid-40s, wearing a dark leather jacket. He kept his distance, but never lost sight of her. His face never turned toward the camera. There was something cold in the way he walked. Police now had a potential lead, but they still didn't know who the woman was. Days passed. Then, a woman named Trisha came forward. Her roommate, Rachel Carter, hadn't been home since Thursday. Rachel was 28, waitress, moved to Lakefield just 4 months ago. She'd sent a text at 11:40 p.m., leaving now, be home soon. She never arrived. Trisha brought in Rachel's photo. Same hoodie, same hair. The Jane Doe had a name now, Rachel Carter. But that only raised more questions. Her last phone ping was traced near a half-demolished construction site 5 blocks from the bar. Julia went there herself, hoping for a clue. At first glance, it was just gravel and rusted fences. Then she saw something, half buried in the dirt. A broken necklace with the initials RC. Not far from it, a security camera was mounted on an abandoned storefront. Spray painted over, But the camera brand? Cloud-based storage. When Julia pulled the footage, her stomach turned. Rachel was walking alone. Then, the man in the leather jacket entered the frame. He spoke to her. She looked uncomfortable, stepping back. He grabbed her arm. Then, suddenly, the feed cut out. But just before it did, a white van crept into view. No logos, tinted windows. It parked in the shadows, engine running. That van became the new lead. The license plate came back to a man named Robert Keene, 45, no record, self-employed contractor, lived just outside town. Julia and 2 officers visited him. Calm guy, said he'd been home that night, asleep, claimed he hadn't been downtown in weeks. But security footage from a gas station near the construction site caught him at 12:07 a.m., buying cigarettes, wearing the same leather jacket. That was enough to get a warrant. Inside Robert Keene's garage, the search team worked quietly but thoroughly. Behind a row of dusty tool cabinets, they found the van. Its interior carpet was stained, not fresh blood, but old, set in, like something that had been scrubbed once, but not completely. Rope, duct tape, a burner phone wrapped in plastic, all tucked away beneath an old tire jack. Then, something even more disturbing. In the van's ashtray were 2 small gold earrings, tiny red stones embedded in the center. Rachel's roommate confirmed they were hers, but he still denied everything. Something felt off. Keene didn't have a criminal record, no complaints, not even a speeding ticket. His house was quiet. His neighbors called him polite, the type who mowed his lawn twice a week. But Rachel's blood in the van and her earrings in the ashtray made one thing clear. He wasn't innocent. But Julia knew that the truth was bigger than one night. She sent the burner phone to the cyber forensics team, and it cracked open the real horror. There was an encrypted folder, dozens of images, different women, blurry pictures taken from a distance, on buses, in grocery stores, walking home at night. Some were dated months ago, some were recent, and some matched open missing persons cases from 3 different states. They weren't selfies. They weren't stolen from social media. These were taken by him, stalked, documented. The folder also had notes, timelines. She jogs alone, lives with 1 roommate, smokes on the balcony every night around 10. He watched them, studied them, waited. But it still wasn't enough. Julia wanted a confession. When Robert was brought in again, he was calm, flat, no fear. He just stared. She asked about Rachel. He claimed again. She wanted to come. She changed her mind. I let her go. But then Julia mentioned the photos. She laid out printed copies of the women. That's when something changed. His eyes narrowed. His fingers twitched, but he said nothing. Then she said something else, quietly. We know about the others. You didn't just kill Rachel. She was the first one we found. He flinched. Julia leaned in. You didn't plan to kill her, did you? She said something. She fought back. Silence. Then finally, he spoke. Not her, he said. She wasn't supposed to be difficult. Julia didn't interrupt. Robert looked down and for the first time his voice cracked. She kept asking questions. About my van. Said she didn't feel safe. She tried to run. I told her to stop. But she screamed. He paused. I panicked. I didn't mean to hit her that hard. Julia asked why he picked her. Robert looked down, then slowly back up. She reminded me of someone, he said, voice low. My ex, from years ago. Julia waited. She left me, said I was too quiet, said I made her uncomfortable. His hands curled slightly. I never laid a hand on her, never raised my voice, but she told people I was strange. After that, everything changed. I lost my job, friends stopped calling, like I was some kind of threat. He paused, his jaw tightening. And then I saw Rachel. Same smile, same laugh, same kind of girl who looks at you like you don't exist until she wants something. Julia didn't say a word. I followed her online first, just wanted to know if I was wrong. But she was exactly like her, always posting, always surrounded by people, never alone, but never really noticing anyone either. Another pause. Then he admitted, I didn't plan to hurt her. I just wanted her to see me, to understand what she did to people like me. That's when she started talking to me like I was dangerous, like I was nobody again, and I couldn't take it. Robert Keene was charged not only with Rachel's murder, but was soon tied to 2 other cold cases through forensic evidence. Rachel's story shocked the town, but it did more than that. It opened many eyes. Be aware, trust your instincts, because monsters don't wear masks anymore. They wear faces just like ours,